Hello, I was told there would be some hosts here before, but I'm very happy to welcome everyone in our audience. And I'm extremely happy to welcome. It's an honor for us to have here Professor Christopher Pissarides, who is going to give us this talk about the future of employment. I think this is one of the most important things right now. In one of the main concerns of everyone in the world, especially after COVID. So it's really an honor for Amafore and for 21 here to have Professor here. Sir Christopher Pissarides, he's a professor of economics in the London School of Economics. 38 years from now. He was born in Cyprus and he's 73 years old. He specialized in labor markets, economic growth, and structural change, especially in theories regarding unemployment based on search and frictions on the market. His book, Unemployment Equilibrium Theory, is a reference in labor economics. In the last decade, he has worked extensively in the labor implications of automatization and artificial intelligence, as well as the surge of China as an global economic power. In 2018, he established the Institute for the Future of Work in London to promote the creation of good jobs in an era of automatization and artificial intelligence. In 2010, Sir Christopher Pissarides was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Science, along with Peter Diamond from MIT and Dale Mortensen from Northwestern University, for their work on economics of unemployment. In 2005, he was awarded the ISA Prize to Labor Economics, along with Dale Mortensen, for his work on unemployment. And in 2008, he received the Aristeon Arts, Literature and Science Award from the Republic of Cyprus. We very much appreciate Professor Pissarides to be here with us, and the floor is yours, dear Professor.
Thank you very much, Razú, for that very generous introduction. It's really an honor for me to be speaking to you. And the delight, and I wish we didn't have COVID and I could come to Mexico. I love the country. I love South America, being of South European origin myself. I see so many common features in our cultures, but also some differences that make it very interesting to travel in that area. So I hope it could happen again very soon. My topic today, as David said, is going to be about the future of work. Is really what's been occupying me for the last at least 5 years. I would think it's now it's being focused around the institute that I set up with others in London on the future of work. And what I plan to do, because it's a 40-minute talk approximately, at least I'll try and keep it that way, is to take you through a description of developments in technology in high-income countries since the 1980s and how and what kind of impact they had on work. And then I'm going to look into the future and say what the role of education and training are in the transition to this future economy. I'm not going to predict, of course, where the economy is going. Prediction is not one of economists' strong points. The strong point of economics is that it's analysis of the past and then saying what we should be doing better so that we get a better future than what we had in the past, because there is always room for improvement. Once we do that, then I'm going to talk about conditions other than education and training, which will be covered under bullet point 2, that are needed for sustainable success. And then I will venture to make some remarks about Mexico and Latin American countries. I have been to Latin American countries. In fact, maybe not in Mexico for talks, but definitely Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And I learned a little bit about the problems that you inherited from us Southern Europeans mainly, but you develop them on your own. Don't think you shouldn't just be blaming us. And what reforms are needed in order to benefit from new technological breakthroughs that we're now seeing in our economies. You see, just, I mean, I don't want to anticipate too much of what I'm going to say, but you see, us in Southern Europe, we have the Germans in close proximity within the European Union, and they're telling us all the time what we have to do, and we more or less have to follow it, however grudgingly. You need someone like that, I think, in South America to be telling you what to do in order to adopt that technology. The United States hasn't been playing a very nice big brother for you, as Northern Europe has been playing for us. The topics, I mean, these are the subheadings that I'm going to cover. I'm going to talk about, when I talk about the history of technology, the recent, I'm going to divide it into what I call the 3 phases of automation. Then I'm going to talk more specifically in the area that is close to my heart, is where I spend most of my career, talking about technology and jobs. In this case, the technologies of automation. We talk about current and future trends. I will try and keep it short, because if I get carried away, we might be talking until tomorrow about them. And then I will talk how we can make the transition to this brave new world of new technology, automatic machines, robots doing all the work, and we sit back and enjoy a life of leisure, as if. And then talk about the role of government, because government became very small in many places in the second half of the 20th century, but I think we need to become bigger now, given the new technologies that we have. And I think that's a fascinating topic, actually, and I hope we get time to discuss it. Okay, topic number 1, 3 phases of automation. Phase number 1 is computerization. That's in the 1980s, that we started introducing computers into the office, and all kinds of companies. Every company had to have a computer around that time. The software that was populating computers at that time could do word processing, data calculations, filing, information storage, and retrieval. And that was done more efficiently than, and more accurately, I should say, than employees could do. And of course, computerization, although it had an impact at that time, it really took off when the internet became available in the 1990s. And we could use the much bigger memories and much better machines that were developed to deal with that. I know to many of you, many young people, it sounds like prehistory, but in fact it isn't. I have very vivid memories of the days before computer. I also have very vivid memories of the day I opened my first computer, and my God, I thought that was the beginning of a new world. Well, I guess it was the beginning of a new world, but it was fascinating. It was such a good little product, which now I would probably not be able to carry because it was so heavy. But at the time, I thought it was very light. Now, the impact on employment from computerization was the substitution of the workers that were doing those jobs that I mentioned, like data storage, filing, word processing. And those workers they were not unskilled workers. In fact, the university where I worked, which was the School of Economics, the one I work now, they had degrees, they had university degrees to be doing those jobs. And a lot of those workers lost their jobs. Now, those workers are in the middle. They were not the very highly skilled ones. Those were, say, academic staff at the university. Then you had the people doing the administrative work in the middle. And then you have the lower skills, janitors, repair people, security people, and so on. At either end, they didn't suffer that much from computers, but the middle did. And the result was this, what's known as the polarization of employment, and there's been an awful lot of work about that, or the hollowing of the middle of employment. Now, what impact on wages did that have? Well, first, the demand for labor for those middle skills falls, so their wages would stagnate. But at the same time, computers were much more complementary, which means that they were being used in the work much more by highly skilled workers than the unskilled. If you go back to university, the professors started using computers. I acquired my first computer, I think, sometime around 1986. And whereas the less skilled people, the security people, the cleaners, the janitors, and so on, never used computers in their work, especially at that time. And therefore, the wages of the highly skilled people, their productivity, and therefore their wages went up. And that increased inequality. At the same time, trade expanded a lot, especially in low-skill content manufacturing goods. And you can attribute that to the development of China mainly, but also other Asian countries, Thailand, Indonesia, and so on. And that gave a further hit to the lower skilled workers. And therefore, we observed the big rise in inequality in wages. The United States was the leader in that big rise in inequality, but the United Kingdom followed very close, and then the other industrial countries. And you can see that in some pictures. Being an economist, I have to show you some pictures. The light blue line is the one of the middle occupations. The dark blue are the highest paying occupations, and the red are the lowest paying occupations. And you can see that in these European countries that were studied by my colleagues at the LSE, Alan Manning, Bose and Salomons, who are no longer colleagues at the LSE, but they were at the time, that employment in those middle jobs went down, and it went up in the highly paid, therefore highly skilled jobs, and the lower skilled ones. Now, second phase is robotics, the introduction of robots, which started in the 1990s and is still growing very, very fast. Now, robots, despite what you see in the movies, that they can do all kinds of things, when it comes to production, it's really manufacturing that they were employed in. Something like more than 90% of robots in production are employed by manufacturing. And I have to tell you, if you think that robots in manufacturing look like the ones you see on TV, looking like kind of steel human beings moving around, then forget it. Robots in manufacturing, just most of them look like little platforms or little machines that move around, or long arms that weld and screw things together and so on. Now, the tasks that robots could do are the ones that were done before by low-skilled workers. They were mainly sort of elbow kind of jobs. Instead of workers screwing parts in a car factory together, now you have robots screwing those parts together. Of course, the introduction of the robots increased to, it was a positive push to productivity growth because they work faster and longer hours, and they were doing things more efficiently. And this rise in productivity, and given that there is a limit to how many manufacturing goods we can consume, led to a fall in manufacturing employment in advanced countries. And I can show you again some pictures there. You can see here which countries are the main users of robots in their manufacturing. South Korea, Singapore, Germany, Japan, and then the Northern European countries, Sweden, Denmark, United States comes in there, and so on. And China, who is right at the far end, is rising very fast. The United Kingdom is not there, you might notice. It's not a manufacturing country, really. Then, and you can also see Southern Europe not coming in there, although Spain, I can see Spain there actually somewhere in the middle. Yeah, España. But it's nowhere near the Germans and the Japanese and the South Koreans, which are the main industrial powers. Now, the impact on workers from the introduction of robots was mainly on lower skilled workers, so employed in manufacturing mainly. So the poor low skilled workers here, you have them first being hit by the computers, which are complementary to high skilled tasks. Mainly low skilled workers didn't lose jobs to computers, but their pay has suffered. And now robots come along and they're taking jobs away from them, whereas the high skilled jobs are benefiting from the introduction of computers and from the introduction of robots, which are increasing productivity in manufacturing and other jobs. And therefore, this is another reason for an increasing wage inequality. That, of course, came through productivity. And when it comes to looking at robots and what they did in productivity, it's not something that automatically comes with all companies. I mean, many companies would just take on robots, replace their workers, and carry on as before in terms of volume. But some leading companies in leading countries emerged, which employed robots more intensely. They increased their productivity more. They gained comparative advantage internationally. And because manufacturing goods are exportable, they expanded through exports. And therefore, their manufacturing didn't shrink as much as it would have done had they stayed in the domestic economy. And you can see that by comparing 4 countries which are more or less the same size, but equal degree of industrialization: Britain, France, Germany, and Japan. I told you earlier that Germany and Japan were leaders in this, whereas Britain was the one lagging behind. And you can see it here. The pink bar shows how many robots were adopted in these countries. And the blue lines show the fall in manufacturing employment. You can see the UK, that is the one that adopted the smallest number of robots, and yet is the one that suffered the biggest fall in manufacturing. The reason, of course, there is that in the 1980s, there is a cautious policy in the United Kingdom led by Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister to develop the financial sector and business management and accounting services, of which the UK is exporting a lot. And basically, the manufacturing took a hit there, and therefore it didn't care about automation through the introduction of robots. It lost markets. It's disappeared basically from the manufacturing world. France is a little bit better, but it has a little bit of the UK problem, whereas Japan and Germany are the ones that had a cautious effort to develop their manufacturing better through the introduction of robots and haven't lost much employment. So you can see that it's not all bad if a country has a good policy towards manufacturing. Now, phase number 3 is artificial intelligence. And AI is much more recent and with more far-reaching implications. AI needs big data and train workers to program the machines. And now computers can process a lot more information than human beings. It's not a problem as such, but when people talk about the problem of AI, what they mean is that we might get into a situation where we don't really know what they're doing, basically. We're just seeing the results. And that's what's worrying people. Uncertainty is always worrying human beings. Now, many people claim that the introduction of AI will bring the end of work. There will be more jobs. There will be no more jobs to do, and so on. Others are saying, well, maybe not. And I'm going to give you my view, of course, on that later on. I'll keep you in suspense in the meantime. What we can say at this stage is that AI is generally complementary to high skills, especially those trained in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And those will benefit a lot from the introduction of this machinery. Okay, now what about implications for companies when you introduce AI? Now, one feature of AI, and it's probably the most interesting feature of it, actually, at least from my point of view, is that we have a choice how to do it. You see, with robots, you don't really have much choice. I mean, you just let robots do these mechanical tasks. But AI, you do have a choice. And sometimes people choose to do it, to use it for good causes. Other times they choose to use it not for very good causes. I mean, look at things that fly in the air. They call them personless flying objects. They could be used for war, drones, I mean, now it's come to me. It can be used for war. They can be used to give food to remote areas suffering from starvation. It's our choice how to use them. And that's what's interesting about it. And that's why government has a bigger role to play. Now, I'm comparing it here with electricity because when people say AI is the biggest discovery ever made, I think they're wrong. Electricity is much bigger. I mean, I can give you a choice. You can either switch electricity of your home or of your city, or you can switch off all computers. Which one are you going to choose? I'm sure you're all going to choose computers over electricity. If you choose electricity, you may not have a home very soon. Whereas at least with AI, you can still carry on. You can use your telephone just to make phone calls. The problem though, even with electricity, is it was straightforward to introduce it. Just throw away the steam power machines and introduce electrical machines, and that's the end of it. Whereas with AI, it's not. We don't know which direction it's taking and how to use it. Okay, automation in jobs. This is topic number 2. I'm sure my watch is fast, or time is moving faster than I had anticipated. Now, the impact to understand the impact on technology of jobs, we have to realize that since the beginning of industrialization, Britain in the early 19th century, you introduce the technology, but it doesn't affect all sectors of the economy uniformly. Some sectors benefit more from the introduction of machinery, whereas others don't benefit at all. And as a result, you get this unbalanced growth in the economy, and employment has to move in response to this unbalanced growth in order to bring some balance to what the economy produces. We're seeing that all the time. Most famous example is the example where the introduction of technology in manufacturing has benefited the production of goods over agriculture, and then agriculture started getting mechanized as well, and there was a huge migration of labor from agriculture to the cities, and we built this urban environment in which we live today. That's known in economics as a structural transformation of an economy, and the cause of structural transformation is usually, if not overwhelmingly, the introduction of technology. That's what technology does. Now, the introduction of that technology will require the reallocation of labor in the economy. We call that the transition of workers to new jobs. And that's the challenge that we're facing, and that's the challenge we're facing with AI now as well. It's not that work will end, it's that work will change. And what we need to do as individuals being affected, and what governments need to do as the ones that say are in charge of restoring kind of order in the economy through their regulation, is to make sure that that transition is taking place fast and efficiently, and in a way that benefits the country as a whole. The term being used, being inclusive and sustainable. Now, if we're going to move into a new type of work, some jobs will be destroyed and other jobs will be created. Which are the jobs that have been destroyed and which are the ones that have been created? The ones that are being destroyed are the ones that are closer to the things that machines can do. If a machine can do my filing, I can put it into this little machine that I'm looking at now. And if there was a person before doing filing in big filing cabinets with paper, then that person with paper is going to lose the job. The job of the filer will be destroyed. Now, what jobs will be created? It will be precisely the jobs that are complementary to what's going on there, like jobs for services that we want that cannot be done by machines. For example, I might like going to the gym. I might like having a trainer to help me train. A robot will never help me train. Imagine if you have a cold metallic machine touching your muscles. Ooh, that freak just would be thought. Those jobs will expand as demand increases. So here are the estimates that are being made. The people look at tasks that are going to be lost to the machines over the next 20 years, and they come up with a number something like 10 to 20% of jobs might be destroyed, and an equal number created elsewhere. And the sectors that will destroy those jobs are the ones that have jobs that are closest to the machines: manufacturing because robots do the work, retailing because there is online shopping, food services because we now get deliveries instead of having to go to the supermarkets and cook, and restaurants sort of cooking with too many people, and anything else that can be automated. Now, of course, for these jobs to be replaced, the machines doing the jobs have to be cheaper than human labor, and that's the case in advanced countries. But you do have countries like India, for example, where labor is still cheap, or even other African countries where labor is even cheaper, that are delaying the adoption of machineries and delaying the destruction of those jobs, because it's a lot cheaper still to have workers doing those jobs instead of machinery. If you compare Japan and India, for example, you see that Japan is much more mechanized than India. It's not that there aren't enough people in India who know about these machines, but Japanese labor is very expensive. Indian labor is not very expensive. Now, companies can respond in different ways. They can just take on the machinery and see where they can replace labor and get rid of their labor and just employ machines, or they could say, let's make sure that we're creating good jobs, that machines can help the workers rather than replace them. Let's try and look for new markets, new products we might produce, better services, and then AI becomes complementary to well-qualified labor. And I mentioned before, David, in fact, mentioned my Institute for the Future of Work in London. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we know how to do this second point down here, companies, and create good jobs where the machines work with the people, rather than this one where you kick the people out and use machines in their place. We're going to get there, because we know what determines that choice. Well, first of all, the availability of labor. A country that is going to do that will need good education and skills, will need a good research environment to see how we can use people alongside machines, and it will need a government that is giving incentives to companies to do it, giving them favorable tax treatment for their research, it provides them with the data, with information. Therefore, it's a combination of educational skills, R&D, educational skills on the part of people, R&D on the part of the company, and policy on the part of the government. Now, what sectors, there is still some jobs will be lost, of course, in manufacturing. We see that happening. And of course, agriculture is disappearing from industrial countries. And I'm sure by now you think that I'm sounding optimistic about what's going to happen in these markets, which means that I believe that jobs will be created. Where are those jobs going to be? Well, they're going to be in sectors that machines cannot work. Now, when we introduce machines, we become wealthier. Productivity rises, income per head rises. And when people become wealthier, they demand many services that they hadn't even thought about before. I mentioned personal trainers, that's one. There are house maintenance, real estate maintenance. People like to live in more beautiful houses. They like going out to nice restaurants. They like buying luxury goods. They like to travel overseas. I love traveling in Latin America. My parents didn't have the chance to do it. This shows the difference in the standard of living, because my parents' generation and mine. They like to have good healthcare from professionals, not stay at home and ask your grandmother if you should take a hot chicken soup, as people say, that cures everything, or if you're not feeling well, and so on. And that's where the jobs are going to be created. There are jobs that involve social interaction, like restaurants and personal trainers and home maintenance, people who come into your home to do work, for example. There are jobs that take over things that were going to be done at home. My mother, believe it or not, used to knit all my sweaters when I was going at school. First time that the factory produced one, and she saw it, she said, this is not much good, I'll keep knitting for you. But sooner or later, she had to come around to the new technology. That means they marketized the job of knitting. That I read a PhD thesis written in the States in 1900 as to what households were doing in Philadelphia, in fact. And remember the name of the guy, but it was published in 1917. And the guy describes sort of a series of tasks that were done at home, washing plates by hand, cleaning carpets, making clothes. It went on and on and on. And then if you read something similar today, you will see that only a fraction of those things are done in the home and the others are done outside. You have laundry services, dry cleaning services, and so on. And of course, luxury services mainly. When people hear the word luxury, they immediately think of design the clothes. I did put them there actually in big labels, but in fact, the biggest luxury is good healthcare and overseas travel and good hospitality, generally, good hotels, good restaurant food, and so on. In terms of spending volumes, and those are the real luxuries of life. And they're luxuries in the way the economists define them. If income, for every increase in income, once you are above a certain level, then you spend more than that proportional increase on goods like good healthcare and overseas travel. And the list of sectors that will benefit from job creation, therefore, health and care, education, the hospitality industry, real estate management, household services, personal services, the ones that cannot be mechanized. You're probably thinking about COVID now and what's going to happen if the nasty virus is still around with these social interaction jobs. Well, I did have another section of COVID, but time is running out already. And imagine if I had COVID as well, we just have no time. You have to invite me back for that, I'm afraid. Now, are there any risks from digital technologies? Well, there are. Not all is good with these new technologies. It could be good, but regretfully it's not, because not everyone in this world has a good heart, despite what they say. Inequality is increasing. Digital technologies favor a few successful companies and certain skills of people. I already talked a little bit about inequality. I think that's a problem. Other people don't think it's a problem, but I think it is, and something needs to be done about it. Data privacy. Europe has been a leader with the GDPR, as it's called, the preservation of personal information. It's moderately successful. It's very, very difficult to know how you can stop big companies from using your personal data. You'll be astonished how much Facebook knows about you if you're users of Facebook. I'm not. And many others, but I'm sure Apple knows an awful lot about me because of the phones I use, just like millions of others in this world. And then something that is very close to what I'm doing is the gig jobs. These are jobs that sometimes currently are called independent work, but they have hours or they're called 0-hour contracts that you might employ someone and pay them only when there is work to do. It's not stable work. It's not something that leads to a career job and so on. And something needs to be done about that as well. We cannot have new technologies benefiting only a section of society and the others going down instead of up. And at the same time, having those giant digital companies abusing our private information through the data we give them. It's so annoying, but I personally don't know to do anything about it. If I go into a platform and I search for a particular product, then for the next week, every day I get an email about the fantastic new products in that range that they have. Well, thank you very much. I've looked at it enough. And that's because they know that I might want to buy something along those lines. All right. A little bit more than halfway through, making the transition, education and training. Robotics and AI require new types of skills. There is research, production, maintenance, how to maintain these machines. There are technical jobs at the very advanced level. There is R&D, research, how to advance these technologies. And those are taught by universities and by very highly tech companies. And universities need to adapt their curricula to them. But I believe that school education is very, very important. Not only me, other labor economists believe. Jim Heckman has been a leader in that. And in fact, he's worked with Latin American data actually to get evidence for his thesis that the most effective learning that takes place is even in preschool, start with elementary school, and STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths, and now we're also adding arts, so it becomes STEAM. You have to get into the mind of children that this is easy. It's like toys. It's not something that they should be scared and running away from, because more and more of it will be around as they're growing up. Now, formal education, of course, is not enough because technology is changing all the time. And I believe the best results come from the collaboration between companies and universities with governments sometimes. And that's at the higher end of the skills distribution. Silicon Valley, of course, is the example that everyone is using. They are successful, there's no doubt about it. But there is a lot more that is successful at a lower or a smaller range. Once you get companies and universities together, then you get the usefulness and where the market is going in the future from the companies, and you get the expertise from the universities. Labor force needs to be, the skills of the labor force need to be raised. I believe that the best way to do it is to give a general education to begin with, starting from school, and then let the person specialize as you are moving up and find the job that suits them best, and then go up a jobs ladder. That's improving the match between them, between their skills and the demand for those skills in the market. Of course, that works much better if you're in a large market. If you're in a small town, there's a limit to how many skills would be required, but size here matters. That the big companies in big markets will give you a much better chance to succeed. Government-sponsored training is important. Singapore has a very good system. It's important for a trainer to succeed that the worker will feel that they own the training, that they do it because it benefits them. There's a scheme in Singapore where they give them money, they give them an account, and they tell them go and spend them in approved training programs that you think is good for you. It's very successful. But the Europeans are doing something along those lines as well, especially the Northern Europeans, the Scandinavians, their youth guarantee schemes. Social skills are important and they need to be learned because social interaction will be there. Caring for children and old people is going to be very important, especially in aging societies and so on. And now this is the final topic that I want to cover. Now, there's no doubt that new technology will require a bigger government. When you say that, people think of climate change, sustainable, because people don't have an incentive to do it on their own, because it's benefiting maybe mainly other people. But even putting that to one side, because there's no time to cover that, government will still be big. I've already mentioned the importance of government-sponsored education and training. That's one. Lifelong learning. You have to adapt skills all the time. Those are government-sponsored programs to be effective, unless you are lucky enough to have a huge company like Google, where you're working for Google or for one of those mega companies that can afford to do their own lifelong learning. Public health is a very, very important, especially in an aging society. And we've seen that with COVID-19, but regretfully, there will be more COVID-19s, maybe, hopefully, rather, not as severe as that, but public health will be around. And then, and of course, environmental disasters that will have health implications. Other reason is that new technologies need more regulation because we don't understand them very well. I mentioned data privacy, fraudulent use of technologies. Banks are losing millions because of hacking accounts and getting in and all that. All these things need regulation. There are a few companies that control an enormous amount of data, and governments need to take action to stop them from doing that. We know what Facebook can do because we've seen all these Senate committees interrogating Mr. Zuckerberg, and we've seen European Commission imposing millions of fines on Google because it had used personal data. It didn't go along with the European GDPR, the Privacy of Data Directive. I can't think of anything naughty Apple did. Maybe they didn't do anything. Jobs are moving away from organized labor into the gig economy, and government needs to protect the gig jobs because there are no trade unions, there are no big employers to protect them. Inequalities at work, I mentioned before that I think that government needs to do something about inequality. A society that is growing inequalities is not sustainable. Now, what's a good scenario? Let me tell you what the optimist in me is saying. The state will prepare a new labor force entrance, children, with good education. They will enter companies that will provide them good jobs, following the principles of the Institute of the Future of Work in London. And they are going to provide them with training programs for career progression. Those companies will be investing in new jobs to promote higher productivity and worker well-being, and workers will get pay rises because of that, because they become more productive. And the government provides social support for cases where jobs are lost, they become unemployed, or families, big families, low incomes, but that social support is designed in a way that it doesn't destroy the incentives for work and investment in new technologies. Does any country satisfy that? Well, of course not, but there are countries that are closer to this ideal than others. My favorite examples, you may not be surprised to hear, they are Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands. I would not say my worst examples because it's not nice talking about, it's not nice criticizing people, it's nicer, much nicer praising them. The revenue for social support will come from taxation, and ideally you should try and get two things at the same time. I was going to use the politically incorrect expression of killing two birds with one stone, but no, I wouldn't use that. That at the same time, taxation should use revenue for social support and reduce income inequalities by having a progressive taxation. You should tax income, not employment. Employment is a good thing. You should give it incentives. But you do need the money, so tax income. If you don't manage to tax income because you don't have the techniques to monitor who is earning the income and there is a lot of tax evasion, then tax consumption, because consumption is very easy to tax. It's what people buy. Now, taxing consumption though is regressive rather than progressive. It doesn't reduce inequality. You tax everyone's consumption. And you need to think about it carefully to avoid that regressive nature. For example, you could exempt food and clothing from consumption taxes. You could make transfers to low-income households and tax very heavily the kind of luxury consumption that I mentioned earlier. Maybe not health, because health is important, but those are the things that people buy when they have a lot of money. You know, a second car, you can double its price through taxation, for example. What about social spending? Well, this is where government, I'm sure that you probably realize that I have in mind some Latin American countries, but as I mentioned, I don't like criticizing people or countries very much, so I didn't mention them by name. But social spending should try and avoid poverty, preferably through supply of good quality services. It's very important that governments act against poverty. It's the one thing that I just cannot understand how the United States could tolerate so much poverty. It's so rich. Why do you allow people to sleep in the streets and be so poor? I mean, it's crazy. My last trip before the lockdown was in New York, and I saw it again. I thought, no. There should be a basic non-contributory pension supplemented by contributory. I think that's the best way to structure pensions, but I'm sure you at Amafore know a lot more about it than I do. There should be heavily subsidized health services so everyone can use them. That's where the United States failed very, very badly, especially the previous administration. There should be care services for children and older persons. That's where the Scandinavians that I mentioned before really succeed in providing good quality caring services. And there should be transfers targeted to needy groups like disabled, large families, and so on, where I guess the Scandinavians are again champions in that. Provide support for the unemployed and workers needed to make the transition to other types of work. That's where I devoted 30 years of my life's work, how to structure those payments just to avoid disincentives for people to get jobs. Now, Latin American countries, as I said right at the beginning, inherited many of the welfare state problems of Southern Europe. It's a region, and that's a shame really, it's experienced probably the worst growth performance in the world, one of the worst. And that's not because it brought some effective welfare support elsewhere. Poverty and inequality are still high, growth is low, welfare support is expensive, but it doesn't do the job that it's supposed to do. And that's where you need to focus for reform. Southern Europe had those problems, but it's escaping those systems, one by one, the Southern European countries. And that's to a large extent is the one good thing that came out of the European Union. I live in Britain, of course, so I went through the whole Brexit disaster. And the reason I was so much in favor of the European Union that the Brits couldn't see is that it succeeded in doing that, as well as ending wars. I mean, Europeans have become very friendly to each other. Maybe not the Brits, but the rest of Europeans. And it's through EU pressure. Southern European countries didn't like it. I mean, I'm Greek in origin. I know, I'm now speaking to you from Cyprus, Greek-speaking country. And I know there was a lot of hostility to these programs that were followed, the reform programs during the debt crisis and financial crisis. I mean, they were not perfect. I know they were not perfect. I criticize them myself a lot. But when it came to the reforms to the economy and to the social support systems, they did help. And that's what you need over there. But you have to take your own initiatives. You cannot rely on a big brother living in Brussels telling you what to do and giving you money to do it. And of course, growth is now beginning to come along. Latin American countries are suffering from too high minimum wages, but I'm told by my friends at Amafore that maybe not Mexico, so I put it there. Too high taxation on work, that's certainly true. They are taxing employment. There's a lot of informality, a lot of not very good social support. I've read some papers and books about that in preparation for this, and I saw it being documented. The experience with minimum wage has been good in Europe, and provided they're being kept at a reasonable level, which is below median income from work. In fact, the current Nobel laureate in economics, David Card, is the one that can be credited with the work to show why minimum wages can be good for employment and wages. And I do believe that. I do support that a lot. In fact, I was there when he was working those models. We spent, I'm afraid too long to admit, but 40 years ago, we spent a semester together at Princeton, and we were talking about these things. You need experimentation to get to the to reach the right level of the minimum wage, but you need to be patient. You don't need to hit the target first time, and you get there eventually. Now, what about informality? Well, informality is very bad for the new technologies, because new technologies require big firms to do research, to take advantage of economies of scale, take advantage of the North American market in the way Southern Europeans are taking advantage of the big Northern European market. And to achieve that, you need taxes to shift away from salaried employment and onto other incomes of consumption. And you need to get rid of informality, because it's killing the incentives for training and high-tech investments. And we can see that in Latin America. It's not contributing much in the development of these new technologies. Look how much Europe is, it's not only the United States, look how much Europe is contributing, how much China and other Asian countries are contributing. Latin America is being left behind because of all these problems they have. Gig employment is something that government needs to take care and make sure there are proper jobs. Some big companies like Uber or Amazon that employ a lot of gig workers can be forced by governments to do what they have to do. And in Europe, in fact, they've done it with Uber and Amazon. And now they're acting as proper employers for them. But there are lots and lots of small companies that employ these create these gig jobs that that there is no one there to make sure that they have a good pension, they have good social benefits, sick pay, holiday pay. A lot of them don't. And government needs to act as a kind of surrogate employer, collecting revenue from them and their companies and providing these services for them. Here we are. We managed to get to the end. No, I didn't go over time very much. Apologies if I did, but the main theme, as you know by now, is that new technologies can increase productivity and well-being, provided they are correctly used. And the future of work requires job reallocations. We need to manage transitions, and government has to play a big role there with effective social support programs and effective guidance as to how to use these new technologies like artificial intelligence for the benefit of the whole of country and mankind to be inclusive and sustainable. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm now ready to take your questions, criticism, and anything else you might want to throw at me.
Thank you so much, Professor, for a very, very interesting keynote. I think it really hits the spot here in Mexico with all the changes that we've been experiencing lately. I mean, in the whole world, but especially in Mexico, because as you stated, in Latin America, informality is it's a really big issue. In Mexico, we have around half of our economic active population in informality, and here also that is intimately linked to their pension, because in a different way than that how you put it here, it's actually the non-contributory is the one that is a complement. It's complementary to the contributory pension. So all the people that right now are working, they're not going to have a very big pension if they're in informality, because they're not going to be contributing to their funds that are the ones that we manage. And in that sense, exactly. The first question I would like to ask you is, what do you think should be the public policy priority for a country or a region such as ours, where informality seems it might get fostered by gig employment and all these other new ways of employment and automatization? So I don't know, what do you think the public policy priorities should be, given the fact that we are already here, we already with 50% of our economy in informality, and at the same time, all these new technologies are coming, and maybe they will be even making this problem worse?
Yes. I mean, you're right. They will make it worse in the sense that they make it easier to go into informality. It's a lot easier for a delivery company with gig jobs, for those workers to go into informality than it is for a manufacturing plant, for example. It's still very important, though, to start from there. Once you get rid of informality, you get unemployment that's probably recorded and contributory, then you can design what support programs you have. Now, there are two ways of getting informality. I'm speaking a little bit generally. One is to police the situation and punish those who are informal, not registered. And the other one is to give them incentives to register and become formal. And I strongly support the latter as the more effective one. You cannot really police the whole situation. I mean, obviously, you should look for criminal activity and take care, but given the extent of informality, it was like it's not a sustainable way of doing it. You don't want to become a police state in the labor market. Instead, give them incentives to do it. So to give them incentives to avoid informality, you have to look at what's causing that informality. And in your case, from what I understand, what's causing informality is the taxation of employment in informal work, and the subsidization of the informal jobs, because they collect the benefits but they don't contribute, whereas the ones in formal employment contribute a lot more than they need. And therefore, what you need is to reduce the tax on employment, shift taxation away from salaried employment. shifted, for example, onto consumption. So everyone pays more or less the same tax, depending, of course, on their income and on how much spending they're doing, structural consumption taxes, so that they are progressive. Once you do that, then they will start seeing the benefits of formal employment in the sense of better regulation, holiday pay, sick pay, promotion prospects, career advancement, training programs, and so on. You won't have this big tax burden hitting you every time you think of those, because the taxes will be outside. And gradually, we start a move in the direction of more formal employment. And at that point, you could start planning better your social support services.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that. And on a final question, because I think we have time here. I just wanted to ask you, and from our audience, all these things, such as technological change and changes in productivity relationships, always bring along or can bring along some inequalities. What do you think the effect is of all these new technologies and automation in the inequality already existing between men and women force? What do you think the gender-wise impacts are?
Well, you see, when it comes to gender, then people usually look at what jobs men and women have been doing, and they're saying, how are the new technologies affecting the jobs that men and women have been doing? And if you do that, then you will see that that women have been mainly working in sectors where there was more social interaction, whereas men in more jobs of a technical nature, in the manufacturing or other jobs that require engineering knowledge, for example. And also, unfortunately, in senior positions in companies. Now, in terms of number of jobs, then of course, jobs that involve social interaction in number, they will increase. Therefore, instead of supply of jobs that women could do, there will be enough jobs. But in terms of pay, inequalities will increase because the new technologies will benefit the jobs that involve use of engineering and senior management positions, rather than jobs in the care sector or in the food industry, for example. Now, that's if you look at gender roles in the past. But I think the way to correct that, apart from doing something about inequality anyway, irrespective of gender, is that there is no reason why there should be this gender specialization in jobs. I mean, when countries were agricultural, there was no specialization. Men and women worked equally in agriculture. When the first industrialization came and there was migration from the land to urban environments and working in the cities, then that's where the split became between men and women, because families had a lot of children at the time. Women were doing most of the childbirth. If you give birth to 6-7 children, it's effectively you are being thrown out of a job that you need to do away from the home in some factory. And therefore, and that I'm talking about 19th century, when the sort of big separation, if you like, of gender roles took place. And we're still having the legacies of that, in that we haven't gone back to see men and women doing the same jobs again as they were doing in agriculture at times. But that's what needs to be tackled. And you do see more progressive countries doing it. Again, I keep talking about the Scandinavians all the time. I'm as far away in Europe from Scandinavia as you can be. The very south, whereas those are the very north. But they do have quotas, for example, for women in top management. diversity, gender diversity in employment now is getting rewarded. You know, stock market returns of companies that are diverse are appreciating more. There's more publicity given, and that's the way to stop it. You know, there is no reason why you should have that division, and there is no reason why men shouldn't be taking jobs that involve social interaction. You know, it's not a shame for a man to look after someone else, be children and all that. And in fact, recently I was involved in drafting a development program for Greece, and we made, I mean, we have a chapter on that, and we made a big case for maternity and paternity leave to be shared between men and women after the first 3 months. I mean, obviously, you cannot do anything about pregnancy, birth, and the immediate aftermath of birth, you know, when there is breastfeeding involved and so on. But once you go past that stage, which maybe is the first 2 or 3 months after birth, then there is no reason why the task shouldn't be shared equally, so that we could both parents could participate in the labor market equally. And I think that's where the future is going to be, so as to avoid this gender gap that we see in wages, I should say.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was very enlightening. I think that's maybe those are some pointers. So to where to look for these inequalities, and we have a lot more questions, but sadly we don't have the time anymore. We've had a really large and interested audience, but we don't have the time to go on. But we really want to thank you for this very interesting keynote. And I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add in a way of farewell of our conversation this morning.
Oh, there are many things, but I just thank you, both you, for looking after this session. The technical organizers, they're obviously people well trained in STEM skills, because having glitches, it's all been live. You know, it's incredible if you think about it. You know, I'm sitting in my study in Cyprus, which is are we 9 hours away, 8 hours away? It's now 6 o'clock in the evening over here. And yet it's as if we're talking in the same room. That's what new technologies can do, and that's what we need to take advantage of. But if you get me started on that, you're going to miss maybe lunch, and I'm going to miss dinner, or maybe you're going to miss coffee or something. So I just thank you all very much. Thank all very much those who've been listening. And I hope you got something out of it, especially if there are young students. Look to the future with optimism, and make sure that you get societies that work well for the benefit of everyone, and the environment, which we haven't talked about.
Well, that's a great note to say goodbye. Look the future with optimism, and in the name of Amafore and Afore XXI Banorte, we really want to thank all of our audience for being here, for listening to this very interesting keynote, and of course, once again, to thank Professor Pissarides for his time and his knowledge. Thank you very much, and please stay tuned, because we still have a very nice and large program for you on these issues with Amafore Digital. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'd love to. It's late here, though. It's late. It's dinner time. Time for a glass of wine.
Good. Have a great dinner, Professor. Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.